Has someone ever sent you an Airbnb short-term rental property, whether from Zillow, a friend, a realtor, or even a Facebook post and said it was a good deal and you weren't sure how much it could actually make? In this video, I want to break down the 3 steps I use to evaluate any property. And the goal behind this is to help you walk away feeling confident in your numbers and to be able to repeat the same steps that I just did. So when I'm doing any type of evaluation, I always use STR Insights as my trusted data platform to evaluate properties on revenue and even markets. Now, STR Insights is going to be rolling out with a property finder. Don't tell anyone if you're watching this in 2023, that breaks down and shoots out property deals that look like this. But for the time being, let's imagine someone sends you a deal and you got to evaluate how much it's going to make. So in this particular example, someone sent me a deal in Sevierville, Tennessee that was listed at $724,000. Well, we'll call it $725 even. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is I have to remember the 4 key concepts that drive revenue in any market. There are location, quality type of property, design and decor, and amenities. I need to understand that about the marketplace first and what the traffic drivers are to make sure this property aligns with those to generate what I call tier 1 level revenue. Now, in every single market, you'll find there are roughly 2 to 3 different tiers of revenue ranges per bedroom count. What this means is that the top performing 3-bedroom properties, like this one, perform between a certain revenue range. Tier 2 properties between a certain revenue range, and then tier 3, we'll call them underperformers, or they look like your grandma's closet houses. They perform at a bottom range. But every market has these different tiers. Smaller markets might have 2, larger markets have at least 3. And in this particular case, we're going to identify the 3 tiers first, their revenue ranges, and what makes those tiers different from one another. And the best way to do this is to not plug numbers into a simple calculator because it's not going to tell you the tiers. The best way is to actually break down in the individual listings in the comparable properties nearby. Now, this isn't just simply the enemy method. This is actually diving in and studying the marketplace first and then breaking the properties by comparable properties into each individual tier level. Let's dive into it. So when I'm looking at this property here, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to just look at the photos of the listing. I'm going to look at the location, the design and decor, the type of property, and any amenities that it has. So obviously this is a really nice property. It's got beautiful long-range views. It does look a little outdated. That deck looks a little old. It needs some improvement, but the interior is pretty nice. They've done a good job. It's got that old cabin feel to it. It's got some decent furniture. Kitchen looks nice and updated. Nice fireplace there, mantle and everything. Well, look at that bathroom. That's definitely updated. They've done a really good job with the interior of this property, and that's important to note. But the real question is, what do the other comparable properties in the market actually look like throughout the entire market? And does an interior like this actually drive and impact revenue? You need to determine that first before you dive in any further into this particular property and determine its revenue. So I'm going to go into STR Insights to determine this. So the first thing I am going to do is I'm going to go back to the listing and find out the location of this property. So when we look at the location, I'm just going to scroll out here. We see it's actually near Wares Valley, which is up near kind of Pigeon Forge, but technically in Sevierville. So I can see the location, and I'm going to study all the properties in this area to figure out what really drives revenue. You know, simple things like it's on this side of the highway, or it's closer to Wares Valley, or closer to Pigeon Forge could actually impact the revenue beyond just simply mountain views. We don't know until we study the marketplace first. And to do that, we're going to go into STR Insights and study the 3-bedroom properties. So I'm just going to select 3-bedroom properties here and scroll in and go through them. Now, you're going to see 3-bedroom properties on a wide range of revenue, and that's what we're looking for. However, remember the 3 tiers, and we've just got to break down what those tiers are. So I see a property here doing 103, one doing 88, one doing 91, 90, 85, 117, 80, 80, and so on. So I've already highlighted a few, and I'm going to break down the tiers for you. So all I'm going to do is just click into these properties and identify the different attributes about these properties that would separate them into their individual tiers. So I did them in order of revenue. I've selected here. You can also in STR Insights export the properties into a spreadsheet and then just click through and sort by revenue and open up the links. It makes it a lot easier to do. So the first thing I'm going to do is go in here and click, and I'm going to look at this cabin. What do I notice about this cabin that might be different than the property we're evaluating? Number one, it looks a little bit newer on the outside. It looks a lot bigger too, and it does have long range views. It does have the hot tub, and I'm looking at other types of interesting pictures and amenities this property might have that's different from the property that I'm evaluating. In reality, it's pretty similar. The interior is nice, and it has the same amenities and the long range views, but when I look at this, it's a lot bigger and probably can host a few more people than our property in question. This property is generating $136,000 a year. It might not be a true fair comparable, but let's just note that that is one that's probably going to be on the tier 1 range. Let's take a look at some of the other properties. So this property here is generating $117,000. And when we look at it, we can see it does have similar long range views, really nice open living room, nice big windows. Interior looks really nice, has some nice amenities, a big game room, looks a little more modern. That's really important because our property that we're evaluating doesn't have those things. Now let's go to one that's doing $103,000. This one looks very similar to our comparable property. It has long range views, it has the game room, it has the hot tub, it has very similar things and aspects about it that make this property do $103,000. However, there are other properties doing $90,000 and $85,000. In fact, there are quite a few doing that if I'm just hovering over numbers here. So let's check those out. Okay, what do we notice right off the bat that's different about this property that's doing $90,000 than the properties that are doing $100,000 plus? What do they not have? And the answer is views. So this property doesn't have a view, but we don't want to rely just on one property. We want to find many different data points to back this assumption up. So when we dive into the property, yes, the pictures are dark, the furnishings aren't great, but the interior quality is pretty decent, but the views stand out to me. Also, it looks like it's part of a community, but it does have a hot tub. So the hot tub is important in this market, but it's not the revenue driver difference. If I look at some other properties doing $85,000 as well, I can immediately tell they don't have views or they're not highlighting the views. And then finally, the last one, same thing too. This one's doing $90,000. So the difference between the properties making $90,000 or less versus the ones making $100,000 plus are the views. And we were able to quickly identify that in this place. Now we can go back to our property in question and look at the pictures. So going back to the tier levels, we had properties generating $103,000 to $136,000 as tier 1, and they have views. The properties that didn't have views were between $80,000 to $90,000. Looking at this property here, because it has views, what tier do you feel like it falls under? In my opinion, this falls under a tier 1 revenue range because of the views that it has. Now, it's important to note that you might have to update a few things on this property. If this property is going to do $100,000 plus, I can quickly determine if this is a good deal for me based on a gross ROI calculation. For this, all I'm going to do is say 100,000 divided by the purchase price of $725, and that gets me a 13.7% gross ROI. That's not shabby. Now that's assuming it's only going to do 100,000. It might do a little more than that. And to determine that, I'm going to dive deeper into those comparable properties here to figure out why this one's only doing 103 and this one's doing 117. It looks pretty obvious to me that this one's a little bit nicer, but the views are important. So if I'm evaluating this property, I'm going to come to the conclusion that this property will do a roughly between $100,000 to $110,000. And I can use that in my revenue projections for the gross revenue. Now, if you have further questions about how you can evaluate a property or you need help evaluating a property yourself, make sure you go to STR Insights. You can speak to one of their experts who know how to evaluate properties and break them down for you and show you how much a property can generate.